college is like moving to a whole different universe with new experiences waiting at every turn. At Texas A&M University, the school prides itself in tradition, and the student body does not take this lightly. From pond hopping to frat pledges singing in the middle of lectures to students hiding electric bikes on top of buildings, the A&M campus always has something abnormal going on. As Aggie students, we are exposed to this new and crazy world that is college and get to witness what mischief other students get into every day. However, after a while, these deviant acts do not faze students like the initial shock did when they first moved here. In our study, we committed an act of deviance by pretending to fish in different water fountains and around campus to observe students' reactions. Our study is important because it tests the environment we are exposed to and the people we interact with, changes our perception of what is deviant and how we personally react to it. We wanted to see if our act of deviance would catch anyone's attention in the middle of campus, considering all of the weird and unusual things that happen on school grounds. We believe A&M's extreme traditions and outgoing student culture has led students to accept actions as what would be deemed deviant as normal. Now you're asking yourself, what does deviant mean? Deviance is defined as the violation of the norms of a group. We perceive things every day and decide to label them as deviant or not. For example, if you saw someone walking backwards on the street, you would think that's weird and consider that to be deviant. However, if you're going a few miles over the speed limit, you wouldn't consider it to be deviant because everybody speeds. As we all know, speeding is against the law, but since it's become so normal to go a few miles over the speed limit, we wouldn't consider it to be deviant. Jensen and Hortsey says that we can see that labeling something as deviant heavily depends on the content of a group norm and the context in which deviant and dissent are expressed. This means that depending on what context you are perceiving something, you would label that action as deviant or not. Say you're friends with super conservative people and you get a tattoo. That would be considered deviant in that friend group because the group's norms are already set. However, say you're friends with tattoo artists and you get a tattoo. That wouldn't be considered deviant because the group's norms are having tattoos. The label of getting a tattoo changes based on the context it's being perceived in. Take this into consideration when thinking about A&M student culture and tradition. Those not a part of the student culture will think that what's going on in A&M is not the social norm and pretty deviant. But when immersed in the culture as a student, you will think of what happens on campus as another normal day at A&M. Time also plays a factor into what we consider to be deviant or not. Group norms are dynamic and responsive to contextual changes and constantly fluctuate as time goes on. The longer you are submerged into a group's culture, the more normal their deviant acts start to be. With our experiment, we believe that doing a deviant act will not be seen as out of the ordinary simply because it took place on campus. This can be explained with our perceptions of what makes something deviant with symbolic interaction. Symbolic interaction is a theory that explains how the formation of society is maintained through repeated interactions among individuals. This means that we use our experiences to place meaning in certain things. There are 4 main points when talking about symbolic interaction. The first, being people act based on meanings and see the world through filters. This means that our actions solely rely on the meanings we personally give something. The second and third points go along with each other. Meaning is created through interaction with culture and society, and we learn those meanings. Through this process, we learn these meanings by interacting and observing those around us. The final and fourth point is that the meanings constantly change through interpretation with others. All of these points, we can understand that through symbolic interactionism, the meanings we put on things all depend on who we are exposed to and interact with. Carter and Fuller suggest that symbolic interactionism recognizes the mutual influence of physical environments. Therefore, our personal definition of deviant or deviance can change based on our environment and those we surround ourselves with. With this in mind, we can look at the culture at A&M. Traditions and student cultures, to those who are not Aggies, find it outlandish and weird, and incoming students to A&M, we thought this as well. The more we interact with other Aggies and immerse ourselves in the culture, the more we allow ourselves to place meanings in those things. This includes what we deem as deviant on campus. Through symbolic interactionism, the definition of what is deviant changes the more we are in an environment like Texas A&M University. The This is the base concept that drove our study in Deviant Act. We wanted to observe how other college students would react to our actions considering their environment they currently live in, and if our deviant act would be deviant enough to cause attention.
Another important consideration we had going into our study was what many college students, faculty members, and other people on college campuses would consider to be deviant acts. By looking at what actions college students and faculty typically label as deviant, we were able to gauge how they would perceive our act of fishing in water fountains on campus. A 2018 study by Cooper and Klein looked at actions that college students and non-students alike described as deviant. Some of the included actions were drinking on campus, smoking on campus, stealing from campus, parking illegally, and similarly to our own study, Cooper and Klein's work specifically notes the importance of socializing students who are transitioning to the college environment because they are experiencing a potentially new structure for rules and laws that they are expected to obey. Our hypothesis and study incorporates some of the same key assumptions as the previous work. As students come into college, we speculated that they would have a changing perspective of deviance because many of the actions that they consider deviant in college environment would most likely have some sort of criminal aspect to them. So this study provides support to our hypothesis since we did assume that college students would have a definition of deviance associated with criminal activity and would therefore not find our action to be incredibly deviant because they tend to classify such deviant acts on campus. They associate those with crime, and fishing in a water fountain is not criminal.
Howdy, my name is Allison Hillman, and I will be discussing the methods portion of our experiment. So first I will describe our population of interest and the sample we used. The population we tried to reach with our experiment was all students and associates within the Texas A&M University campus. We used a sample of those who passed by us as we were performing our deviant act. This convenient sample was the best way to randomly get students and staff to see us and to capture raw reactions. And we feel that the sample was pretty representative of the population due to the fact that it was completely random and we had no control over who would pass by or what kind of reactions we would get. Next is our variables and procedure. Our independent variable was us performing our deviant act, which was fishing in the water fountains. And the dependent variable was the reactions that we got from others, whether that be in the form of stares or conversation. Our procedure was pretty simple. We began at the H2O water fountain in the chemistry plaza. We cast the pole and held it as if we were waiting for a fish to bite, and occasionally we would recast the line so more people could see us in the act of fishing. While two members of the group performed the act, the others stood at a distance and video recorded the fishers and people's reactions from afar and wrote notes on what people said to the fisher. And after about 30 minutes, we recreated these steps at the Sabisa water fountain and did that for about 30 minutes. So now on to the results of our experiment. Our hypothesis was correct in that we did not get any dramatic reactions to our deviant act. The reactions that we got were pretty simple and subtle, just some stares, smiles, and whispers. A few people were brave enough to stop and joke around with us and wish us luck, and one person even asked if we knew that there was a real pond on campus with real fish in it that we could fish at. But we believe that our hypothesis was correct due to the fact that everyone on campus is no stranger to the weird and crazy things that students do on campus, so they are used to seeing deviance performed on a daily basis.
The results from our study display how deviance can be perceived differently depending on who is observing the deviant act. This is consistent with the theory of symbolic interactionism because people have different understandings of deviance due to varying interactions. Our hypothesis considered this, as we proposed that people would consider our act deviant, but they would not react in a manner that is visible, because on a college campus, people are exposed to many things on a daily basis that can be considered deviant. Additionally, we looked at studies that reinforce our hypothesis because of the idea that college students and non-students on college campuses consider deviance to have some sort of criminal aspect to it. By performing our deviant act and fishing in the water fountains of Texas A&M University's campus, we collected observations that did support our hypothesis, and only 4 people actually said something to us, such as, "What are you doing?" or "Are there actually fish in that water fountain?" So none of these people actually showed that they were disapproving of our actions. Everyone else just gave us weird looks and kind of kept walking, so we concluded from this that not many people felt that our act was deviant, and if they did, it wasn't deviant enough for them to say something about it. So in conclusion, our deviant act provided results that supported our hypothesis, and they were also consistent with symbolic interactionism theory. Some other things that should be taken into consideration for future studies in the execution and design. First of all, we had to do our act when most people were in class, so not many students saw what we were doing. So that is the first thing we would recommend changing. Do it where more people can observe the act. Secondly, fishing in a water fountain is not incredibly deviant on its own, so perhaps in a future study change this so it looks more illegal, such as fishing in somewhere that would typically require a fishing license. And then one final suggestion for a future study would be change the method of gathering responses. We could only tell what people were thinking by the expressions on their faces or what they said to us, so we weren't actually able to get their opinions. So perhaps ask them what they were thinking, like, do you think this is deviant, or how do you feel about this? Those are some suggestions we would make for future studies.